very welcome to the Woman to Woman show here on Confident Women Ireland's YouTube channel with me, Roisin the Cleric. Here on Confident Women Ireland, we cover women's health from conception, birth, cradle, and to our final resting place. In this week's Woman to Woman podcast, we are discussing pregnancy, childbirth, breastfeeding, midwives, and doulas. So if you're navigating pregnancy, childbirth, or breastfeeding, or exploring women's health and wellness, my guest, Tracy Donegan, is a treat for you. Tracy is a midwife, author, and founder of FemTech companies, GentleBirth and FertileMind, and is the host of the Tracy Donegan Podcast. Tracy is also a mindfulness expert, doula, and international speaker. Tracy Donegan dedicates her work in advancing women's health and wellness. Tracy says her goal is to empower you through every phase of your life, whether you're looking for support in fertility, seeking guidance in childbirth, exploring options in breastfeeding support, or curious about managing the menopause. We're going to discuss the recent Midwives Mama conference in Scotland, which took place in the beginning of May. We'll be talking about doulas and midwives working together to support mothers, the resistance from hospitals, the language, and that ties in with what happened at the Mama conference. What's happening in Ireland, and midwives advocating for more birth options. So Tracy, you're very, very welcome here to Confident Women Ireland YouTube channel again.
Thank you, Roisin. It's lovely to be here. It's so nice to be a guest on a podcast. You can just chill and enjoy the conversation. It's very different when you're on the other side of the camera.
And
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, for me going on, I was a radio broadcaster for years, broadcaster and producer. And so then it was a big transformation coming onto YouTube. Because in radio, you don't have to look at the camera, you just look. But luckily, it was still, I would say my degree we had TV camera in it. And I go, okay. But so no, thank you for coming on. It's always lovely to speak to another podcaster.
Yeah. I think we have the same pain points when it comes to podcasting, and but it is a great way to reach like so many more women and anyone who's interested in kind of the work both of us do. So it's always nice to connect in with people with different views as well. So I think we need more of that today. I think being able to sit down and literally have a chat. And again, as we were talking about earlier, to see if we can find the truth and find meaning somewhere in the middle for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the north. I'm from Derry. So I grew up in conflict. And I grew up my best friends were from the other side of the fence. And we all got on and we all listened to one another and we all respected one another's different point of views. And I think that's important, is being able to, I left the media as well in 2022. Because everything was all being silenced and everything was one way. It's good to have different topics from different perspectives and different opinions.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that's the way I think everybody learns and everybody grows. I think if you have somewhat of an open mind when you're having a conversation with, and trying to understand where that other person is coming from and why they believe what they believe, and hopefully you're being offered the same grace from the other side. But there's I mean, with the social media at the moment, it's like everyone seems to be offended by everything, and it's really we've lost the plot to try and, I mean, how can you even sit down and have a conversation and have a cup of tea when it's you're censoring yourself and try to be really tiptoeing around topics. And so I always welcome an opportunity just to have a chat and be authentic and not hide behind the censorship, which is kind of what a lot of us are doing these days. Yeah.
I think censorship is it's silencing, and we're not learning from one another. It's dividing and conquering, and nobody's doing anything, and everybody's just fighting. Everybody's just against one another. I stand for this, or I stand in this group, and if you agree with this person, I'm not going to talk to you. It's complete nonsense, I grew up with most of my friends not agreeing with my opinions, but we still went home, put on makeup, and went out dancing together.
Yeah. There is, and I think that if we can find a way to find that common humanity, because we do have far more in common with each other than we do disagreements. And I think you can find, and it is like finding that thread, that common humanity, even it is, we're going out, we can argue all day, but we're going out dancing tonight, it's we know that there's
swapping clothes, borrowing makeup.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and we talk about, the good old days, like making like we're ancient, but it just felt like there was just less. I think social media has just brought all of this contention really literally into your hands, into your face, like 24 hours a day. As long as you're in that phone or on social media, you're just your brain is not getting a chance to actually think for itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're losing so much of our really independent thinking and finding the opportunities to find that humanity in the person that we're talking to, no matter how much we disagree with them.
No, and having that critical thinking, which we're told in college to have critical thinking, as long as it's to the lecturer's mindset and thinking and perspective. And then you write your assignment to the brief to the lecturer's opinions. Yeah. Then you get an A.
Yeah,
I know. But at least you don't get. But at least
but at least like, okay, we know how this professor works, and we're going to play up to what they're asking for, and I think that's part of playing the college game, though. But I think overall, I thought universities and colleges were supposed to inspire that critical thinking and reflection, and I just don't know if that's where we're at the moment. So it doesn't seem to be. Well, I suppose what's happening in the colleges.
Yeah, well, like what we're going to talk about, I was born having my own opinions, I've always had my own opinions, and I've always sort of disagreed with an awful lot of people, with other people's opinions, but respectfully. And I think it's something from Mary Kern, who's on the podcast, and I was speaking to her this morning. It's about agreeing to disagree and having honesty with integrity. I think if you have that honesty with integrity, you can agree to disagree comfortably. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I said, so I think we're going to do a lot of agreeing to disagree this morning.
I love that.
It's not necessarily with us, but I think some of your viewers may find some of my opinions a little bit challenging. But again, I invite you to keep an open mind and try to understand where I'm coming from, and likewise reach out and let's continue the conversation after today.
Well, I like having that opening discussions. It's always nice to have a platform where you can open discussions and have discussions in a safe place and space. Really. Well, so, Tracy, you are a midwife, as I said in my intro. You're also a doula. And just before we get started, let's give your podcast a plug. So where can people find you on your podcast?
So they can find me. It's the Tracy Donegan Podcast, and if they go to my new website, tracydonegan.org, they're going to find lots more information there. And it's actually we've just launched the website, so the next kind of week or two, you're going to see more and more additions to what I'm offering and what I'm doing these days. So.
And you're an international speaker as well, and an author.
Yeah, it's the international speaker. I feel like, am I an international speaker? It's just I've had wonderful opportunities to share what I feel is important information to help women through one of the most significant experiences of their lives. So usually when I'm speaking internationally, or whether it's locally here, it's on breastfeeding, it's the use of, how we can use our mind to make the experience more positive, ways we can reduce fear around childbirth, and so that we're looking forward to labor, not as just, the moment that I get to actually meet this little person, but looking forward to labor as seeing labor as a challenge, that this is something that's going to test me both mentally, physically, and likely spiritually. So I want to help women access tools that will help them have the best experience for them as they define it. Because if women are coming out of birth having really great experiences, or at least not traumatized, they are stepping into parenthood as different parents. Their mindset is different. Their approach to, raising children is different as well. And all of those, as early life influences impact the rest of society. So if we want to raise more gentle human beings, we have to start right from parenting and really, I guess, look at how we were parented. And because I think most of us go into parenting thinking there's lots of things that I would do similarly to my parents, but there's certain things I would do a little differently. So I think having the kind of mental space to start kind of having that inner dialogue with yourself. And then the books were I guess, an extension of that. Again, another way to help women have, the best birth experience and breastfeeding experience that they can. So, and it is possible. It's not just a look of the draw that the midwife I get on the day, or whether my blood pressure goes up on the day. No matter what happens on the day, having a mindset that is flexible and that is that understands how the kind of default settings of our brain work is really, really helpful in those early days of postpartum when your world has literally been turned upside down.
And your body has been gone through the biggest shock of its life. When you think, you've carried a baby from a little tadpole and it's grown, and the baby's grown inside you, and the baby knows you as much as even what you're thinking. And and what you're feeling, and it also knows too what you're thinking and feeling, and how you feel about other people who's in your life around you.
And I don't think we really take that on board enough, and I think when we do, it can sometimes become like another stick to beat ourselves up with. That where our babies are being flooded with different chemical messengers every day. So the more in the oxytocin space we are in, a kind of that rest and digest and relax state, our baby's brain develops differently compared to if we are in a constant threat state or fight or flight state. The brain then, because the baby's brain is being built based on what it's being exposed to outside. So if the baby's brain thinks that the outside world is unsafe, then the baby's brain develops differently, and it develops with a heightened response to perceived threat, compared to a baby that has literally, when I say grown up, had 9 months of exposure to meditation and relaxation techniques, and being able to be aware in any moment, like when you're in the supermarket, that okay, somebody cut in line and really, you could have gone two ways here. You could have gone off the deep end and given them a piece of your mind, or you could have taken a few breaths and just let it go, or just reframe it as, they didn't see me, or maybe they've got, an elderly relative that's really ill at home and they're trying to just get home really quickly, and I'll give them a pass this time. I think being actively able to regulate our own emotional state during pregnancy is hugely important, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody's teaching women how to do this. So we are the architects of our baby's brain.
Yeah.
So we can do it in a positive way or a less than positive way, but babies are resilient, and we can do so much for those babies postpartum, and that unconditional love and everything that they're getting from us then also goes towards building that baby's brain in the postpartum, when their brain development is really speeding up in those first couple of months.
I remember I gave birth, and then my late ex-father-in-law was a kidney dialysis patient. So I was in Donagan Hospital in Derry, and he had his renal dialysis in Omagh. So he used to get the minibus to Omagh, and my mother-in-law would have collected him from Mount Nagelvin Hospital. So anyway, I had Naomi, my daughter, and my mother and sister were walking through the hospital foyer, and they saw him. They said, "Come on, they call me Roshan up north. Roshan had the baby." He went, "What?" And so he came up, and I was holding Naomi and just holding in my arms, and she heard my father-in-law's voice, and she just turned around. I was holding her. She just turned her head fully around to the door and smiled up at him. Well, we say it's wind, but she just looked at him, and then her eyes. So then I turned with her, and her eyes followed him where he was. She recognized his voice. And
Oh
always
yeah.
remember that.
Yeah, isn't it lovely?
Isn't it
It's
lovely?
yeah, it's so really we don't give babies enough credit for the
No.
skills that they are born with, literally,
Yeah.
they do recognize sounds. And there was some studies done years ago where the mom would recite a poem or a nursery rhyme several times, during the day throughout her pregnancy, and they were able to tell, I think, by the heart rate of the baby as well, and the baby could literally tell who was saying the nursery. Like the baby could identify their own mother,
Wow.
so they are learning in the womb. They're not learning in the way that we understand learning, but there are brain connections that are happening. And even though they mightn't have conscious thought about, oh, there's Uncle Bob, or that there is an awareness.
Yeah.
And again, we don't give them enough credit. We think that they're just, this um blank slate, but as no, they actually bring lots of talents with them.
Yeah. And I always notice, probably you notice, and a lot of your clients and patients notice, isn't it amazing the ESP that a mother and the baby has? And when you always wake up a couple of seconds
Mm,
before the baby wakes up and the night feeds
yeah,
or anything, you're always awake before they wake up or cry or have wind or colic or something.
yeah. I think it lasts for forever. I think, when we look at the biology, during pregnancy, there are fetal cells that migrate into our body, that stay in our body. So we are always connected to our babies,
Mm.
wherever they are in the world. I think something like, the way twins would say they have this kind of ESP. I think moms and their kids, yeah, you always have a feeling about how they're doing or not
Yeah.
doing well. And yeah, even if they're not sitting right in front of you, there's that connection.
Funny thing too is when my son was born, he was born with eczema, right? Eczema. Now, I never had eczema in my life, but I had about that size eczema on my leg during the end of my pregnancy. And now he's 27 now. I always know when he's stressed, I get the eczema in the exact same spot.
Wow.
Isn't that really amazing?
It is. But it shouldn't be, it's
Yeah.
the fact that, again, we carried this being for 9 months, that of course we're going to have some kind of connection with them. And now eczema is not the kind of connection that I think everyone is looking for.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is. Yeah, there's so much that we don't know.
isn't it? It's a, it's,
Yeah. And
it's
I
a
think,
miracle, isn't it? Like I
I think
remember,
being open to that miracle, and
yeah,
that, yeah,
I
there's
to
so
me
much we don't
too,
know.
that was that. So I found the biggest miracle of my life was one when I got pregnant, knowing I was and you're a midwife, got pregnant. Then when I had my first little kick, and I
Mm,
thought I was in
yeah,
bed and I thought something rolled over in the bed and I got up at the bed to look to see what I dropped or what was in the bed. Then I
right.
realized it was the
Yeah,
baby, it was Naomi kicking me.
yeah.
And, then the moment I gave birth to her, and I went, oh my God, how does she
Mm.
live and breathe inside me?
It is. It's astounding. I mean, when you're in this work, you don't spend a lot of time anymore thinking about, actually, when you think of like what had to happen,
Yeah,
like all of the stars aligning, your great grandparents meeting, like how far back it goes to this one moment of meeting this new being. It's quite, yeah, it's mind-boggling, really, when you
isn't
think
it?
about what had to happen for this moment to happen now. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God. When she knew my voice, as we were saying, and then I was feeding her. But I kept going, oh my God, how did this human being, this life, this little baby, live and breathe, as I said. And then it was like, then it was that bond, that bond that you have with your child, your baby, even before the baby's
Yeah.
born. And so, midwife. So I just thought that would be a lovely intro to talk about the connection between mothers and babies in pregnancy. You are a midwife. You're also a doula. And as we said,
Yes.
you are an international speaker and you've written books. And we'll put a description box link in the description, in the in the description box below, we'll put the links to your website and your books, etc., and your podcasts. But I'm curious because you do travel. You're from Dublin. You're based in Texas, and good old yellow rose of Texas, and but you're also traveling around. You're back in Ireland 2 or 3 times a year, and a couple of weeks ago you were over in Scotland at is it the Mama conference? Am I pronouncing
Yeah,
that
the
right?
Mama conference.
Mama conference.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. That was interesting, I believe.
So the Mama conference, it is for any midwives or birth professionals out there watching. It is one of the most wonderful conferences for student midwives specifically, and midwives who might have been at this for a while, that just need to reconnect with the reasons why they became a midwife, and to engage with a really nurturing community, because being a student midwife is not easy. There's a lot of bullying that happens. It's like when you're on labor and delivery or labor ward placement, it's quite a stressful placement. It's an exciting placement, but it's very stressful. And who your kind of preceptor is, who you're assigned to for that day, can really make or break your experience on labor ward. So the Mama conference, it's been run for several years now. This was the first kind of in-person back in-person conference that's happened now after COVID. But it's run by this brilliant midwife called Cass McNamara, Scottish midwife, absolute just an incredible powerhouse. And she runs, she's got a business that she has run out of China, and she's just really just an amazing midwife. But so I had been invited to speak about photobiomodulation, which is red light therapy as a therapeutic intervention for moms in pregnancy and for labor and postpartum. So I was really excited to come and speak, and just to reconnect with all the midwives and the students. So I had arrived into Glasgow I think it was on the Thursday afternoon, and the conference was due to start on Friday. And it always has a huge turnout. And it's if you go look at some of the past conferences, it looks like a 2-day party for midwives, and it really is. So, but unfortunately, the Cass received some quite disturbing threats to herself and to the conference itself. So, and because there were other quite big conferences that were happening that weekend as well, then the police had to be involved. So there were bomb threats made to the hotel where the conference was. So, once the police were involved, then, we had to, Cass had to notify all the attendees and let them know that, these threats have been made. We don't expect anything to come of them, because unfortunately, this is how it's gone in the past. But yeah, so she had to let everybody know that, and quite a number of people decided, that they didn't feel safe coming to the conference, and didn't come to the conference. So it was lower attendance than we've seen in most years. But we just, I think all of us there decided that, okay, this is not the plan we had in mind, but we're not going to let it get the better of us. And really, if midwives cannot meet to talk about women's health and maternal health, then where are we, in the world, that we cannot have a conversation about women's health without someone trying to silence us. So it seems that I guess the person that was making the threats was not happy that a trans speaker wasn't invited to speak at the conference. So that was but it is a conference about women, and a conference about mothering and newborns and breastfeeding. So it's really not a conference for someone who wants to come and debate ideology. So it was really unfortunate, but it was a fantastic conference anyway. I went ahead, and I'm sure it will be back with bells on it next year as well, because this Cass McNamara is not someone who will go away with her tail between her legs. It will be, I'm sure, bigger and better next year, and I'm definitely going to be back to support it.
What is the most sacred thing on earth for women coming together to talk about the delivery of newborn innocent life into the world. Like when you think about midwives, it goes right back to the beginning. Who do we
Exactly.
trust the most in times when we're having a baby? It's midwives, it's doulas, it's most sacred thing, really.
It was the handy woman in the community that used to
Yeah,
look after the women, and it was women's work, and it's still women's work, really. But it was disappointing that really one person could have so much influence
yeah,
over this gathering, and it was. And gatherings like these, they're a way to share new research, new information that is important for the health and well-being of mothers and women. So it was, yeah, it really was disappointing. Of course, absolutely devastating for the organizers who put
yes.
so much time and effort into running this conference. And so many people who had wanted to come really were just frightened out of coming to the conference, and they lost out too. So it
I
was, at the
suppose
end of
that
the
would
day, it
make
was
me
mothers
even
and
more,
babies who were
yeah,
losing out.
that would
Yeah.
make me even more determined just to buy a ticket and go, even though I'm not expecting, because this is what it's all about. The most sacred thing now is about women. Women is only women can reproduce, only women can have babies, only women can breastfeed, only women can have
Yeah.
periods, only women can go through the menopause. So to disrupt the most sacred conference about midwives, and as you said, the new information, new knowledge, and new experiences is so sacred. It's nonsensical why anyone would want to hinder or disrupt a
Yeah.
conference about women and newborn babies.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I even, because when I was giving my talk on Saturday, I had a moment of, oh, what what if they did follow through with the threat? Now, I did not have any concern for my own safety or anyone else. I felt like there was the hotel were absolutely fantastic, and everything was done to keep everybody safe. But there was a moment of, oh, what if I misjudged this? But I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not
No,
going to stop saying the word mother or woman because it's offensive to somebody. We're at a point where we have to just like cop on, you know?
get real. But
Yeah,
come back to reality. You know,
yeah,
and you know me, Tracy. I am the and I really don't care if people be offended and confident women. And men cannot be women. Men cannot breastfeed. Men cannot have babies. You know, men should not be in women's sports. So that is Competent Women Island's philosophy on it. Not philosophy, but that's a belief on it. It's an absolute belief. There's no other thing. You know, and I think it's absolutely disgraceful when ideology overcomes reality. And the most
mm,
sacred thing in the earth is young babies and women in a vulnerable position of being pregnant. The most sacred, most magical, mystical thing in the earth is a woman having been pregnant and then giving birth and holding the baby for the very first time.
yeah. It is. Yeah. When we started this conversation this morning, just to talk about really the mystery
Mm.
of conception and
Yeah,
how it all happens. And there is so much there that, again, we don't fully understand, but we do have a really good foundational basis in biology
yeah,
that tells us that, yes, it takes male and female to create that new life. And there's no getting away from that. So
no,
I think it was not a good lesson. I think it was good for I think there were some attendees who themselves may have kind of been a little bit more influenced by this ideology than they really realize. And I think it was good for those attendees to see really how this ideology can be so damaging when it's happening, to your colleague whose,
yeah,
conference has literally been shut down because of, somebody felt that we weren't being kind to them. So but look, we can't let, and this was in Scotland, and we can't really, we can't just ignore the fact that it's happening in Ireland too. You know, we have unfortunately a cohort of birth doulas and childbirth educators who have also started changing their language away from mother and away from woman to, you know, birthing person and chest feeding. And it's what's quite interesting is when I speak to my midwifery colleagues in Ireland, majority of them are pushing back against this and absolutely reject the idea that a midwife assigns a baby's sex at birth. There was no class that I took in Dundalk that showed me how to you know, assign a baby's sex, because it doesn't happen, because the baby's sex is usually observed through several ultrasounds during pregnancy, and usually it's the same, not always, but most of the time it's the same sex when that baby is born, and it has not been assigned in any way. But unfortunately, yeah, we do have a cohort of birth doulas and childbirth educators in Ireland that are just now become biology deniers. But I do understand where they're coming from, because they're coming from a place of compassion, but it is misplaced compassion. Mm-hmm. Because what we're seeing now is, and it's for women who contact me and they're looking for, you know, classes that support biology, classes that don't, you know, avoid the word woman or mother and don't do, you know, the body feeding and whatever else is the latest trend in language, that they're identifying these doulas by their pronouns, you know. So like back in the day, and I have to say, like, you know, a couple of years ago when everything was, the language, things were starting to change, I was also of the opinion that we're being inclusive and it's kind, and we want everyone who experiences maternity services to do so in a dignified and humanized way. But since that's happened then, and that what I think a lot of birth workers don't realize is that pronouns has now opened the door to men in women's sports, men in women's prisons, in just as I mentioned earlier on with the sports. Now we have young girls here in the US who have, you know, been competing since they could walk, whether it's in swimming or track, and they have, you know, become like really, I guess, put their whole lives into being the best at their sports, and then are eligible for scholarships, like full scholarships to some of the best universities. And for anyone who isn't aware of, you know, the cost of education in the US, it's absolutely ridiculous. So a lot of these young girls would never have an opportunity to go to these colleges other than by literally, you know, breaking their backs every day, training so hard. And now they've had their titles, their records, their scholarships taken away from them because of there's been a change in the language for what was known as Title IX here in the US, where there was special concessions made for girls and women to compete in their own individual class and to, you know, to progress women's sports. So, but now that's kind of been binned, and now sports has been open to everybody. So I think I don't think most people realize, and I certainly didn't realize, the damage that just a simple, like that simple pronoun was at the time. I didn't realize it was opening the door to so many other challenging eventualities for women. You know, now men coming into women's bathrooms, coming into our locker rooms. Like if I'd known back then, I would like, oh, no. We need to adopt a really cautious attitude before we start changing any language. And because there was no real research done on the impact of changing this language. What does it mean? And especially in healthcare communications, like there are a couple of great papers that I would encourage anyone to review. And I'll email them to you, Roisin, so you can put them into the show notes, because there's really, really excellent articles and written by several researchers around the world on the importance of using sexed language in healthcare communications. So as doulas and as midwives, we purport to be providing evidence-based care. But if we are denying biology, we are hardly giving evidence-based care. So it's I think things are starting to change a little bit in Ireland, but I think as more midwives, more doulas stand up and say, actually, maybe we got this wrong. And I think we have to create that space for people to come back and say, I think maybe we got it wrong, or maybe we shouldn't have gone the whole hog. We should have been more cautious with
Yeah.
with these language changes, as because it was quite subtle as it came in.
Yeah.
But now I've
They brought it in very slowly. They brought it in and
yeah,
planted. They brought it in bit by bit until they normalized it, and it
yes,
became normal. And then they filtered it through every NGO, every organization, every department, through the health, the education, through business, through banking, in every area, and politics. You know, it's nonsensical that it was deliberate strategy done drip by drip, step by step, until it became normalized. Well, what they perceived to be normalized. But the referendum here in Ireland, Tracy, the 75% of the people definitely told them, no, no.
yes, yeah. That was really encouraging. I have to say that from to watch it from afar and to really because like, and I think we were talking a couple of weeks before and wondering like what is the fallout going to be if they passed? Because there was that worry that if this like yeah, I can't, and I don't want to get into what's happening in Irish politics at the moment because I'm watching it from afar and I'm watching it with like in absolute like shock with
Yeah.
what has happened in Ireland the last 10 years. And every time I come back, as much as I do love to come back, I just don't know if Ireland is really headed in a positive direction with the way things are at the moment. And I hope that, hope I'll be wrong on that and we'll be back to chat in another couple of years and I'll say, Roisin, I had it all wrong. And but there are some good things. I want to touch on some really good things that are happening in Ireland at the moment. We are seeing uh, really this emergence of, we bring it back to kind of midwifery and the care of women and babies. We're seeing this emergence now of the advanced midwifery practitioner. So these are considered kind of consultant midwives who are really now, they just, look, midwives have never been invited to the table when it comes to decision making and legislation in Ireland. But I think we are not just finding a seat at the table. They have these new advanced midwifery practitioners have just dragged in a chair and pushed into the table, which is what we've been waiting for to happen for a long, long time. And so because I will speak to midwives on a regular basis who would share information with me that I will share with women about what's going on in their unit, what's happening with the water birth, or so it's so for to see this change and to see there's some really, really good stuff happening now with these midwives that are really pushing back now on we're at a point now of such over medicalization of like literally in like it is more common now. And again, something we've normalized or we've allowed to be normalized is that we've higher rates now of induced labors
Yes.
for first time mothers than we do for spontaneous labors. Spontaneous labor is becoming, a unicorn and for midwives we are experts in normal birth, in normal pregnancy. But if you never get to see a spontaneous vaginal birth, which is what so few obstetricians get to see, but we're there with the women. We're going to lose our skills in observing what is normal. So it's just become this carrot that's waved in front of women, first-time moms' faces as they're coming up towards their due date, and they're being offered it earlier and earlier in pregnancy, without really good information on the potential downsides to inducing. It's easy to shake that carrot in front of someone who's just, they're 38 weeks, they're fed up, they're tired and sore, and they're just really excited to meet this baby. And they're being told, yeah, we can induce you, and you'll know what day you're coming in to have your baby. And then sometimes you show up and they don't even have a bed for you because they're trying to manage beds and It's
It's
an absolute
messing with
mess.
Mother Nature, isn't it? Because Mother
Yeah.
Nature, I always was told by all the older women, in my community today, oh, is the baby resting yet? Is it still kicking? Ah, well, if it's still kicking, because babies rest up for a couple of days, or sometimes 2 weeks before you give birth. They resting up before they put all the energy into delivery.
Actually, that's quite an interesting point, because now that kind of we're looking at the research around what babies do towards, and that used to be the thinking that,
Yeah.
yeah, the baby's conserving energy, he's getting his stuff packed up, getting ready for the journey. But really, if a baby's pattern of movements changed significantly in those last couple of weeks, that is definitely a flag to be checked out immediately.
Right.
Because even though they might not be, doing, like, when you're 30 weeks and they've lots of room to move around, you feel those quick kicks quite significantly. And as they've less and less room towards the end, there should still be that regular pattern that you're used to feeling. So maybe it's sitting down after your tea in the evening and you're like, oh, here it is. Or, more likely it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they're having a rave.
Yeah.
It's like, but if that's their usual pattern,
Yeah.
great. But if anything that moves away from that normal pattern that you're used to, then I would absolutely say get in touch with your local hospital. That's something that we definitely want to check in with. And don't go drinking icy water or having a Lucozade or trying to wake baby up. That's just could be wasting time. So we'd rather hear from you sooner that you notice that the pattern has changed. Yeah.
Because I knew I had a funny feeling 3 days before each I gave birth. I said, it's been now. And I delivered early. I came early, both births were early. But I just had this feeling. And that is something magical, isn't it? That the mother, is this communication between mother and baby that it's not talked about. It used to be talked about years and years ago. But that's really interesting too. What is the purpose then? My question is, I'm very curious, why now are the over medicalized of childbirth and through midwifery? What is the purpose of now the induced births being induced? What's the purpose of that?
Well, part of it, how it kind of began in Ireland, was there was a really big trial that was done in the US, 2018, I think it was published, called the ARRIVE trial. And it looked at a group of women where they would induce healthy, well, first time moms that they would induce early, compared to women who they didn't induce. So there were multiple issues with the trial. They had a hard time, first of all, recruiting women for it, because most women are thinking, well, if there's a problem, then induction, even though I don't want it, makes sense. But you're trying to induce me just to see what happens.
Yeah.
So after that trial was published, and what was interesting was the results of the trial seemed to show that, okay, you know what, actually, having a doula gave the same benefit, but without all of the other issues that, like, with trade-offs of side effects of medication. So maybe we just have more doulas and we wouldn't need to be inducing women, and we could still manage the cesarean rate. But that was the ARRIVE trial. And there were a couple of opinion papers published after that. One came from Europe and one came from Australia, saying that was based on a US population. It wasn't a very well-run trial, and we will not be adopting these recommendations in Europe, and we will not be adopting these recommendations in Australia. But then the Rotunda during COVID decided to run the same trial and gave themselves ethical approval. If anyone out there knows me, they'll know that I have been quite unhappy with this trial and the results of this trial for several years now. And the results were just published in January. And basically the results said, yes, we can induce women, start them off with induction so that they can go home and then come in later with their partner. And it didn't really reduce our cesarean rates, but it did help us manage beds better.
Really?
So
wow.
The end game was, it helps us manage beds better, and sorry for your trauma.
Wow.
Because they were actively, and again, for anyone who knows anything about research, you don't go chasing down participants at home, texting them or emailing them, asking them to take part in a trial, and then give them half-baked information about what the side effects of early induction are. So it was an absolute disgrace, as far as I'm concerned, that it was ever published, that it was ever be allowed to run, because I was hearing from staff that they were, because they were getting so few numbers, now they were targeting teen moms.
Wow.
So how far could the Rotunda's ethical standards drop? That's the question.
Wow. That's a real food for thought there, isn't it? Teen moms who don't have that life experience, and nervous, still going through them teenage anxiety, and young mom, young mother, and vulnerable.
And during COVID, and being told, oh, well, if you opt in for this induction, then your partner, you can go home, and then your partner comes in and your partner will be able to stay with you. So you couldn't make up the amount of ethical issues with that trial. So it ended up, there was no song and dance from the Rotunda when it was published, because there had been so much negative press about it.
Yeah.
That when it was published, I think it was in an American journal, I think it was a little small piece that was published, and so much information left out, no information about how many women ended up with significant perineal injury, how many women ended up with a postpartum hemorrhage. Really helpful information for any woman who wants to make an informed decision about having an elective induction. That wasn't provided. I have emailed the authors of the study, no reply. So I guess they're just happy enough with their with that paper and the ethics that did not support it.
Or is it whoever pays for the research too? When you have to look at it, who's paying for the research is what the research is going to provide for too.
Well, the research was partially funded by pharmaceutical companies. So again, like,
speaks for itself.
Yeah. And there was another paper that was published a couple of months ago here, and I think it was the Rotunda as well. And quite interesting. It was, I don't remember what the title of the paper was, but it was something like the rise in cesarean rates, and the paper had been done probably about 2 years ago, so the rates have actually increased since then. And basically it was saying, yeah, our rate is 38% cesarean rate for new mothers, so what? So that's the attitude that women are faced with going into challenge the status quo at the moment. So I would always suggest, do your research, hire a doula who is on the same page as you, wherever you are ideologically, to support you, to help you navigate the system. And that was why I wrote my first book, the Irish Better Birth book, was to help women navigate their way through what can be such a disjointed, I mean, our health services are totally disjointed anyway, but to help women navigate their way through the system, but in a positive way, and to understand, okay, here's some ideas for questions that you can ask to help you feel like you're getting all of the information to make those decisions. But now with COVID, and still some classes haven't come back into person, they're just online. So women aren't getting a chance to really engage with their providers and with the midwives to ask these questions, or sometimes they'll ask the question when they're at their antenatal visit, but the policy is actually quite different up on labour wards. So it's, again, disjointed information, and women are very confused.
So before we talk more, can you tell for our listeners, I only learned what a doula was about 18 months ago. And then I went, oh my God, I wish I had a doula. Or when my daughter does get pregnant, I'd love to pay as part of my gift to my daughter, my grandchild, the services of a doula. So for the audience who do not know what a doula is, what is a doula and what do they do?
So basically, a doula is a professional birth companion that is there to provide informational support, physical support, and emotional support before, during, and after the birth of the baby. So a lot of when I work as a doula, when I work as a doula, I don't do any kind of clinical care. I'm not taking the temperature. I wear a very different hat, but I still have the mind of a midwife, kind of the bigger picture. But it's it's very much helping, like some of the families that I'm working with at the moment, is helping this mom and dad understand, okay, here's how the system works. And based on the kind of experience that you would really like. So I want to have a vaginal birth. I really don't want to have a C-section. I would like to have an unmedicated birth if possible, and really not to be traumatized. And when I'm seeing that more and more now, I don't want to be traumatized. Like, it's like, there's a lot that doulas can do to support women and their partners to have a really positive experience. So we're there. Usually our clients will call us, but as soon as they go into labor, we'll go to their house. We'll have already kind of helped them build a labor toolkit of tools to help themselves. We'll be with them until it feels like the right time for when mom makes that decision to go to the hospital. And we're following along behind, or else they'll call us to say, we're on the way to the hospital, we think baby's coming, and we just meet them there. And we're there as that continuous presence that the mother and father, they already know me. We've been met together a couple of times. They know that I'm going to be that friendly face in the hospital, that, because they haven't met any of the other staff before, and they're usually here. Their OB arrives in kind of maybe close to the end of the birth just to catch the baby, but they're not there really during labor. And it's such a, not just a wonderful nurturing presence for that mother and father, but it's well evidenced as well. So there is so much research that shows that when a mom has someone who is providing that level of support to her, that's not someone from her family or circle of friends, and it's not somebody from the hospital, we see this really big improvement in outcomes, that women, their labor is more likely to progress without having, Syntocin on to speed it up. They're more likely to be mobile and moving around, so they're less likely to need pain medication. And you have that one focus as a doula is to reassure that mom and to tell her how great she's doing, and which, as a midwife, that's the loveliest part of the job. But you can't be all things to all women. So, like, when I was a doula in Ireland, we had a great midwife who also had to do all the charting and all the clinical care as well. But when I was a doula, I was there to fill that gap when it needed, when the midwife went off on her break or went off on shift, and we had a new midwife come in. Your doula is that continuous presence, knows what's on your birth preferences, knows how to facilitate discussion with your midwife and doctor if needed, and really just there to help the mother find her voice and her confidence really on that day, because we're not there to speak for her, and we don't take the place of the partner. We're there to help the partner engage in a way that's comfortable for them as well, because especially if you're a first-time dad and you're kind of thrown in the deep end, not knowing what to do. So we're just a gentle guide behind them, showing them some things that might be helpful, different comfort measures, and if labor is long, that they can go and leave the room and go get a sandwich, or just if they needed a moment, if they were getting overwhelmed, that they could go and take care of themselves for a few minutes, knowing that their partner is in good hands with the staff and with their doula as well. So it really is lovely work, and I think it's such a lovely idea for people who are thinking of a helpful presence for babies. Forget the 10 newborn outfits, and having the family contribute to having that doula, because they'll help with breastfeeding and get you settled in at home, and that's when the shock really kicks in. So if you can't have a birth doula, get yourself a postpartum doula. Some do both. And they're there just to make sure you're surviving those first couple of weeks. Do you have milk in the fridge? Are you getting any sleep? How's your partner doing? Let me hold the baby while you get in the shower. It's that nurturing kind of mothering that we give to new mothers, that a lot of moms don't have. Maybe they don't have a mom that can offer that to them, or they do, but we're there to offer it in a different way, with evidence-based information on recovery and newborn care. So, because things change, as between generations, and what we did years ago, what was, I remember growing up and the thing was, oh, the gripe water. So
Did you remember
gripe
that?
water, gripe water.
Grape water was the answer to everything.
I remember babysitting, I was probably 13 or something and being left babysitting. It wasn't my own family. I was doing a babysitting job. It was one of my first jobs and I was left with, and here's the bottle of gripe water if the baby wakes up. And but that was, it was gripe water. But these days now we're not doing the gripe water so much. Um,
Breastfeeding. Now, I didn't breastfeed with my daughter, I breastfed my son. And I really wanted to breastfeed, but my nipples, I didn't have good nipples for breastfeeding. So there was this old lady. I used to work in Out McGelvin before I got married, so I knew the old midwife down in the antenatal. I mean, she was just about to retire. And
right.
so so I sent down for her and I says, I'm having difficulty, breastfeeding. And I was bruised, I was everything. So she
Yeah.
came and she sat with me at every breastfeed. She even came up and stayed after hours and waited, went to the canteen, had her dinner and came up and helped me breastfeed. That is traumatic for a young mother when she says, am I doing it right? When the baby won't
Yeah.
feed, what's wrong? And then a lot of young mothers or mothers will give up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's part of the reason why breastfeeding continues to be so difficult in so many countries is we're teaching it all wrong.
Uh-huh.
We're still teaching now. Now there was some, again, great research that was published earlier on this year by a midwife by the name of Margaret McGuigan, and she's also a Lalesh League leader, and on laid back breastfeeding. So we can actually, instead of having women, sitting bolt upright in these positions here, what the cross cradle hold and football hold and all of these weird holds that make breastfeeding more difficult and make nipple damage more common, is we lie mum back, what I call the Netflix position. So we lie her back in a comfortable position so that baby is literally held here by gravity.
Ah,
And babies are born with these reflexes to find their food. And when we have a baby with their full body contact, making full body contact with us, including their feet, we turn on these feeding behaviors.
right.
But when we're sitting up, we have gravity is pulling the baby away from us, and the baby's feeding behavior then become disorganized. So we'll often moms will say, "Why does the baby keep like pushing my breast away?" And that if we turn the baby's position, the baby will do that as a way of massaging the breast to release the milk. But
Ah,
we think it's boxing and they're pushing us away or they don't like us. And when we kind of personalize that baby doesn't like my milk, or then it's once we kind of that seed has been planted, we really need somebody external to say that's actually not true. That is, your baby is, especially in those first couple of weeks, they work on reflexes only. A baby is not thinking, I don't like the taste of that milk, I prefer something else. This is where babies were supposed to be. So now with this new research that Margaret McGuigan published on laid back breastfeeding and other papers that have come out over the last few years, this is now considered the gold standard approach, that we get babies lying on full contact with mom, that they will get a deeper latch themselves, which
ah,
means moms are coming out of the hospital with less nipple pain and are more likely to continue breastfeeding because they're not having a midwife come and grab their boob and push the baby on and all of that, which is kind of unnerving. Yes, if it's your first time breastfeeding and you've got all of these people with their hands all over you, so it's yeah, again, like we're just kind of, we've got some great midwives out there that are now championing, this laid back breastfeeding. So this will be a huge help for those new moms that are, worried about breastfeeding or nipples falling off. And because no, we can really help moms to if we're just I joke about it, calling that old way the vintage breastfeeding, sitting up on a sore perineum or a sore bum and trying 10 times a night. No, we have to be showing moms how to feed lying back. We have to show moms how to feed safely in bed because they are going to fall asleep with their baby at some point anyway. We can't avoid this conversation. We have an ethical obligation to give this information to mothers to understand how they can safely bed share with their babies, because couches and futons and fancy chairs are really a danger. And breastfeeding hormones make you want to nod off. They were designed to make you feel good.
Really? Breastfeeding hormones make you want to nod off? Wow, I never heard that before.
Yeah, so if and it's why when moms who bed share with their babies, and I did with my second, I could have fed Cooper 6 times during the night, and I would not have any memory of how many times he fed.
Wow.
I didn't feel like I even woke up, because I would, as we said earlier, I'd wake up like a moment before he would start to mooch. He would latch on, and that was it. There was no. I remember my parents saying when they were staying up with us, and I think it was my dad said, "Oh, you wouldn't even think you had a newborn in the house, because you didn't hear him at all at nighttime, because his needs were met like almost instantly. There was no, I didn't have to get up like I did my first. And because I had been taught that you have to get up out of bed and sit in the expensive rocking chair that everybody buys, put the lights on and and you're sitting there like thinking, is this my life now? And nobody's getting any sleep. And I remember sitting feeding my eldest, and it was probably 4 o'clock in the morning. I felt like I had no sleep. And my husband kind of waving to me, going off on a business trip. I'm just thinking, oh my God, I've got like 4 days ahead being alone and doing this. Like it was, yeah, I was not prepared at all for postpartum breastfeeding and that. And I was only on my second when I was like, that's got to be an easier way. How did we survive as a race if we weren't like following our, literally our instincts and that mammalian behavior? Because I guarantee you, 100,000 years ago, when we were living in caves, we were not getting up in the middle of the night to go sit on a rock to feed our babies. Our babies were kept close to us, and we're the only mammals who think that we should have our babies in a separate space. You never see tigers putting their cubs a mile away in a hill. It's we for protection, we keep our young beside us, and for growth, and for, our body is our respiration, everything is helping our babies breathe. There's a reason, a biological reason we are supposed to be together in that postpartum, and supposed to be in that close proximity in those early weeks of postpartum, and just getting that breastfeeding established. But again, there's a lot of misinformation out there about how to, feed safely and never have your baby in the bed. And I think most parents, I think I was the same, I think going into my second pregnancy thinking, oh, I'll never have the baby in the bed. Baby will never be in the bed. This is what every single first time mom thinks. And within a month, most of those moms will have had the baby in the bed. So we need to be doing it safely.
Well, my name is 32. She was in the bed with me. And then Keenan was. And then right up until they were 10, they were fighting over who was sleeping beside me. And then I said, okay, one can sleep in the bed, one on the floor, you can take turns.
Yeah. Just put the mattress on the bed, solve all the issues,
But no, so tell us about your book, Tracy, because you've really, really, really taken everything into hand, from the public speaking, from the podcast, and from your book. So tell us, what first of all inspired you to write your book?
Well, I guess when I was writing the Better Birth book, it was really coming from a place of, there was nothing available for women that was like information in one spot. They were getting handouts, and probably still are. They go to their antenatal appointments and they would get a lot of handouts, and then their GP would give them some other information, and then they'd go to citizens advice on more information. But there was no kind of centralized resource for women. So I was actually started writing the book out when we were living in Singapore, and I was training as a doula then. And I self-publishing wasn't a thing back then. So I thought, I've written a few chapters. I'm going to just send them out to some publishers and see if there's any interest. And the Liffey Press came back and said they were interested and wanted to see some more of my work. So literally it was interesting. Like we were due to publish, I think it was December 2005 was when it was due to publish. And that, I think it was around the same week, Dr. Peter Boylan published his book called The Irish Pregnancy Book. So two very different, so my book launch was postponed for a couple of weeks, but two very different approaches to pregnancy and birth. So we were coming from one aspect, so is the Better Birth book, which was a midwifery perspective, and you had the very interventionist perspective of an obstetrician, was still at that point recommending episiotomies, and there was no benefit to giving birth in an upright position. And so I've updated the book over the years, but I think it is due for a little update now. I think it's been about 10 years since I've updated, and so much has happened. I do think women need another voice that's not another voice that's less about the medical management of pregnancy and birth, but more about inspiring women and cultivating courage and learning about their options and really engaging in their care. Because if you don't engage in your care, you just kind of go along with what everyone else thinks, and sometimes what everyone else thinks is not the best for you or for your baby.
Yeah.
And you only learn that after the experience, and that's why we've unfortunately growing levels of birth trauma in Ireland. And it's currently the first and only study that's been done is actually done by the Rotundo. It was a really nice paper looking at birth trauma, but we're looking at about 18%. And I think anyone who's engaged in the birth world will say that is absolutely a low ball number.
Yeah. When did, in your opinion, did we start to over medicalize childbirth?
It seems to come in phases. So at the moment, induction is kind of what we're for a long time, and Hannah Dallin spoke about this really well at the Mama conference. Like I think like our eye was off the ball for a little bit. We were so focused on reducing the growing cesarean rate and why so many women were having cesareans, that we were we missed out on this monster that was growing on the sidelines. And then with the Arrive trial, with COVID, it just created this perfect storm for and the birth pools in some hospitals were shut down, and really women's options were very limited. Doulas were being told they couldn't come in anymore. So thinking that after COVID we would get back to some sense of normality, but in a lot of areas we've gone backwards in maternity services. There are, as I said, there's pockets of the glimmers that we're seeing with midwives around the country that are now training midwives in water immersion and water birth. So this is such a fantastic option for women, and it's a really focused on midwifery-led care because consultants aren't involved in water birth, or water immersion. So it's really. The midwives are loving the training. They are excited to work with women. Women are excited to find out their local unit is getting a pool. So we're seeing some really great things. But I think after COVID, it was just, I think we had some misplaced hope that things would get back to normal and be even better. But in some units, that really hasn't happened. And I guess women just aren't. I don't know if they're not asking the right questions, or they've just placed all of their trust into a system that, unfortunately, now I've seen nearly 20 years of seeing what the Irish system does. I think abdicating all of your decision making to a stranger who's going to go home at the end of the day and not remember your name tomorrow is probably not a good decision.
And probably delivering so many babies a day, and on the ward as well. They could have like 10 babies in the labor wards ready to deliver, or cesarean, or for induction as well.
And the midwives really are caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. They are, because even when I was out on doing my midwifery placements as part of my training, you would have, women would show up if you're on antenatal, and they would show up for their inductions. And when we, sit with them and go through, their admissions, and then, why are you here for your induction? And a lot of the women couldn't even tell. They didn't know why they were being induced.
Are women being just completely sidelined and silenced, and in every shape and form?
It seems to be there's some aspect of, women being kind of controlled again,
Yeah,
and put in their place. And
yeah.
there was a post that I shared a couple of weeks ago. Now, it was from a few years ago. It was from before COVID, but it was from an Irish consultant that was interviewed, and was saying that women who have birth preferences, or who want to have care that's, not the standard Irish care, are birthzillas. So, and privileged. And I was like, the point was, you should be glad of the care you're getting. And midwives and doctors would never do anything that could be harmful. But it's like, not intentionally are you going out to harm, but by the fact that you're not implementing evidence-based care, then we have to kind of, ask more questions. Nobody's accusing any midwife or any doctor of intentionally causing harm, but by ignoring the evidence, and by creating barriers to evidence-based care, like preventing women from accessing the pool because, say, oh, our staff aren't trained. Midwives want to be trained. Midwives want to use these pools. Midwives didn't, I would say, 99.9% of us went into this work because we want to give good care.
Yeah.
We want to look after these women and babies. We want to offer them the best care possible, and the best care possible is evidence-based care. But if you're a midwife and you're working in a hospital that ignores evidence-based care, if you're in Holles Street as a midwife and you're being told that if you're on the labor ward, you have to break every woman's waters that's coming into the delivery suite, even though we know it is not considered best practice, even we know there are trade-offs, that cord prolapse is one particular trade-off, and that means an immediate emergency cesarean for that woman. So midwives are so caught between this literally rock and hard place that they have to, follow the guidelines of their hospital, even if they don't agree with them, even if the evidence is in a completely different place.
And I think midwives, I was born at home, and my mother had she must have had a really good relationship with the midwife, because she became my godmother, and we stayed in touch for years. Even when we moved away, we used to go and visit her. And Nurse Albans, that's her name, in Kent, Nurse Albans. But it's the most mystical time in any woman's life, and even in the father's life. The miracle of life, the joy of your creation of something that you and your husband, or you and your wife created, a new life out of life out of love. That is something, and you want to know when you go into the hospital, to the labor ward. And that's why I love a doula. A doula can tell you as a mother and as an expectant father. When I say expectant father, I mean he's waiting to be a father. He's not pregnant. Just clarify
that.
But in everyday language. Whereas probably midwives and doctors, obstetricians, gynaes, they're all talking in medical jargon, where the doula could explain that to you in everyday language. She'll know when you get stressed. She'll know it's fine. They're just going to do this now. No need to worry. Nothing serious. But as you said, the midwives are filling out the chart and talking to the consultant or whatever. And the doula is there to actually just keep you relaxed. Keep the liaise between the medical jargon and everyday language, or go out and get that sandwich, and it's there for you. And midwives, I think, it's the real old-fashioned, back to basics. Women within the community, bringing in the new baby of that community, no matter where you live.
Yeah, and that's the ideal. that if we could recreate maternity services tomorrow, it would be that women had continuity of carer,
Yes.
not just care. So they knew one or two midwives that they got to know through their pregnancy, that they knew that one or two of these midwives will be at my baby's birth, and you have that lovely relationship that grows throughout, and you never forget that midwife and that experience that you had. And that would be the ideal, and that is associated with more positive outcomes for women and for babies. But as I always say, consultants are part of the private system, and turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
No.
So even though we have this national maternity strategy that was supposed to put midwife-led units aside, some of our larger maternity units, as long as consultants are kind of driving this train, we're not going to see the really evolution of midwifery and that community midwifery in Ireland, which we could have. We have already clinics that have that satellite clinics out in Finglas, but that needs to be everywhere. We don't need women coming into a centralized hospital full of infection and for all of these appointments when they could be in their community meeting with that little group of midwives that they'll build a relationship with because what we're also seeing along with birth trauma is that we have a significant amount of midwives that have experienced vicarious trauma through their work. So even though a lot of people will look at, call the midwife, and that's the idea in their head that they have, oh, my midwife is going to be like that and is going to be so nurturing and kind. With so many midwives themselves experiencing trauma through their work, they have, as a kind of protective mechanism, you become disconnected from your emotions. So you cannot, not all midwives, but there's a lot of midwives, especially those who have not been given support to process this trauma. They can't connect with that emotional level anymore. They can seem more standoffish to the mother, and they don't connect on a deep basis with the mother that they could have if this trauma had not really scarred them and made it difficult for them to make those connections. So it's everyone is suffering. The women who've experienced the trauma, the midwives, and the consultants absolutely as well. But there's no talk within Irish maternity services of creating programs around nurturing these literally wounded midwives and wounded consultants and help them, bring them back to the place where they joined this profession because they really believed in helping, in the helping profession. And unfortunately with trauma, they've kind of, a lot of them are left scarred and just not enjoying their work anymore, which women feel, of course.
Yeah. I think that's something maybe we should be bringing back, and we should be making that politically, especially for political mandates and programs for governments, is bringing back that nurturing for women's health, women's well-being, and for babies and children's well-being, and bringing those midwives back in the community, and so there's a relationship, as you said, before they go in to have the baby, that they know familiar faces. They may not see them on the day, but at least there'll be a familiar face if they see all the different midwives and the doulas. I think that is an act. I love doulas. I'm way past postmenopause, so I won't be having babies, but it's something I would love my children's, my daughter, maybe my future daughter-in-law to have. So there's so much more to talk about, Tracy. You also talk about all women's health and well-being. You talk about fertility, you talk about menopause. So maybe we'll get you on in the future talking more about that, and also updating us on more things that is happening in the midwifery and the maternity services here in Ireland, because we need to get this message out there to women, and also not be afraid, of giving birth and all that, because it's the most mystical, most wonderful, most wonderful experience.
It can be. It can be. Yeah.
I'm going to cry now thinking back. And I remember talking about the doula. I brought Naomi home. And she was a crier. She would have cried all night. We had to get up and take her out in the car. She would stop once she was in the car. Then as soon as the car stopped, she would start again. However, she wouldn't feed. So there's a lady lived up the street. She had, I think, 20 children in the street that we moved into. And so she just met my husband. He said, oh, you've had a baby. How is it? And he says, oh, she's not feeding. She's not feeding. She says, next time your wife's feeding, she says, call me up. I'm up in the house. Call me up. So he came in and told me, says, I'm feeding in an hour. So she woke up. She went up and got it. It was around 5 o'clock. I'll never forget that. But 5:10, she came in. She said, here, give it to me. She took Naomi in her arms, fed her the bottle, because I didn't breastfeed Naomi. Naomi drank her full bottle, right? It was only about 30 meters. She was a newborn. I said, what did you do? She said, this little rascal, babies are smart. She knew you were a new mother. They're smart.
And she picked up on your stress as well. Yeah.
Because she knew you were a new mother. She said, I'll come down once a day and help until she's feeding properly. And she did. She came down that same time. Mrs. Elliott, I'll never forget her name, Mrs. Elliott. Yeah, thank you.
And that's what we
Elliott.
used to have. Well, Mrs. Elliott, yes, thank you. Because this is what we used to have in our community. We had the handy woman. We had the woman who had the knowledge, and it wasn't the midwives' knowledge or the lactation consultant. It was just women sharing that knowledge within the community, and that would be a lovely place to get back to if we had communities that talk to each other. Yeah,
neighbors that talk to one another.
Yes, yeah.
You see, what I'd love you to do is if you could send me even a photograph of your book. And what we'll do here in Confident Women Ireland, we can promote it. We can either promote it at the beginning of the show, the end of the show. We might even do a little ad in the beginning of the show to promote your book.
Sounds lovely. I'll never say no to promoting my books.
and your podcast as well. So we can promote that. And so just remind our viewers your podcast, your book, and how they can contact you.
Yeah, so they'll find everything on my website. So it's tracydonegan.org. And yeah, they can reach me. You'll find me all over social media, whether it's on GentleBirth or email. It's tracy@tracydonegan.org. And I'll send you more details for the show notes.
Yeah, and I'll put them down in the description box, and they'll all be down there. Tracy Donegan, as usual, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you. And so we met you in person about a year ago. I met you in person up in Dublin, and really enjoyed that conversation. And all the very best with everything you're doing in Texas. And say good. But the weather's lovely, is it?
It's going to be a nice day, yeah.
Oh, well, we have rain here, typical rain. 4 seasons in one day.
I know, I don't miss it.
Tracy Donegan, thank you so much indeed for taking the time to come on and speak to Confident Women Ireland today.
Thank you so much, Roisin. Lovely to chat as always.
Thank you, Tracy.